There's a hidden but deadly fat inside your body that could be quietly attacking your health. Now, it's not the kind you can pinch, but it's the one that can shorten your life if left to build up. Now, I've been a personal trainer for the last 10 years and I've worked with some of the most successful entrepreneurs around, plus a handful of celebs and the odd Hollywood actor. Now, I ain't telling you this to blow smoke up my own arse, but at less than 300 subscribers at the moment, I'm trying to build up some credibility. So hopefully you'll just stay and watch the video so I can maybe get more than 100 views. So in this video, I'm breaking down what this deadly fat is, why it's so dangerous, and the steps you can take to get rid of it. First of all, let's start by making something clear. Not all fat is created equal. The human body contains various types of fat, but for this video, I'm only going to focus on two. Now, that first one is subcutaneous fat. This is the one that most people are aware of. Now, this is the fat you can pinch. It's the one that none of us like to pinch, but it's the one that most of us can and probably pinch too much. Now, that fat lies just underneath your skin. Now, while your body does need a certain level of subcutaneous fat to function, not to mention for protection, because that's what fat is there for, too much of it can be detrimental to your overall health and then your quality of life as a result of that. When someone says they can't see their six-pack, it's because they've got too much of that pesky subcutaneous fat sitting between their abdominal muscles or their abs, their six-pack, whatever you want to call it, and their skin. There's a second type of fat, and it's a soft layer of fat that provides much needed protection around several of the internal organs. Now, unlike subcutaneous fat, this fat is very importantly metabolically active. It plays a role in how your body not only stores energy, but also how it uses energy. And very, very importantly, it's also used to release hormones and inflammatory substances within the body. Substances? Inflammatory substances. Let's rewind that again. As well as inflammatory substances. I'm going to go with that. Now, too much of this fat is definitely harmful to your health and has been linked to increased risk of both cancer and cardiovascular disease. Obviously, two things we want no part of. That fat is known as visceral fat. Now, unlike subcutaneous fat, which I mentioned a minute ago is found between the skin and the skeletal muscle, visceral fat is found around your heart, your intestines, your kidneys, your liver, your pancreas, and your stomach. So all those key internal organs, all very, very, very important to how we function and how we live. Whereas subcutaneous fat is thought to be like relatively harmless to your health, visceral fat is a different story entirely. And that's the reason for this video. And it comes down to one thing in particular: inflammation. Visceral fat secretes inflammatory cytokines, or proteins secreted by the immune cells. Now, that's not something we really need to know, but it needs to be said for the purpose of the video. And these drive inflammation within the body. It does this around the most important organs in the body. This is why visceral fat has been directly linked with cancer and cardiovascular disease. Now, there was a study from 2010, which you can clearly see here, and that showed that visceral fat and abdominal obesity, so the obesity and that excess fat around your stomach, around your gut, around your belly, whatever you want to call it, had a direct impact on not only metabolic disease, such as like diabetes and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, but also on mortality risk, aka the risk of dying. The really scary thing about visceral fat is that it takes a relatively small amount to cause problems. Author and doctor, he's an absolute legend in the health and fitness industry, and that is Dr. Peter Attia. He mentioned in his book Outlive, which if you haven't read and you're interested in health and fitness and longevity, which we all should be, go check it out because it is an awesome book. I think I actually, oh, there you go. It's actually just right next to my desk. There it is there. Outlive, the Science of Art of The Science and Art of Longevity by Dr. Peter Attia. So I definitely give that a recommend and give it a read if you haven't done so already. That was complete chance that it's there. But you probably won't believe that, will you? He had an awesome example in the book to actually highlight how little visceral fat is actually needed. The example he uses, and I've got it in front of me on my laptop here because I'm not going to remember that word for word. And he says you are a 40-year-old man who weighs 200 pounds. If you have 20% body fat, making you more or less average in the 50th percentile for your age and sex, that means you are carrying 40 pounds of fat throughout your body. Even if it is just 4.5 pounds of that is visceral fat, you would be considered at exceptionally high risk of cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes. And you would be in the top 5% of risk for your age and sex. But what actually causes visceral fat? So hopefully I've scared the bejeebus out of you and you're like, shit, I don't want this visceral fat in my body. What is the cause of it and what can I do to fix it? To know what causes visceral fat, you first need to know what causes any type of fat to build up in your body. That is a big old calorie surplus. That's what. Eating too many calories and not burning enough. It's as old as the day is long. When you continually eat more calories than your body needs, aka positive energy balance, your body's going to store those excess calories in your subcutaneous fat for later use because it doesn't need them. Now, this cycle will continue and is perfectly healthy. It's part of your normal biological makeup and it's something your body needs to do and will do as long as you haven't exceeded your fat storage capacity, which is unique to each individual. So no two people are the same. Now, if you continue forward with just absolute no regard for calories and your energy balance, and you just stuff in your face and you don't give two shits about how many calories you're taking in, how many calories you are expending, that's when problems start to show up and shit proverbially hits the fan. Because if you're continually in a calorie surplus and you ain't expending a whole bunch of energy, your subcutaneous fat cells are just going to gradually fill up and fill up and fill up until there just isn't any more room left for them to keep filling up. They've reached their storage limit. It's like that wardrobe we have or the drawer next to our desk where you just shoved so much crap in that one day you go to shove more crap in and you're like, oh, there's no more space for me to shove my crap in. And it just starts flowing over the edge. That's the same thing as your fat storage. When a person reaches the limits of their subcutaneous fat storage and their just capacity to store fat, but then they continue to just consume too many calories, that extra energy doesn't just disappear, okay? It doesn't just disappear into thin air, which I know some people would love to be the truth, but unfortunately it's not. And I would love that to be the truth on a Saturday night when I've smashed a meal for 3 and a whole tub of Ben & Jerry's, but unfortunately that's not the case and I have to do an extra big walk the next day or not have any breakfast. The calories are still going to get turned into fat. And where it gets stored is very, very dangerous. If it spills out of its preferred storage space and finds its way to your heart, your pancreas, and all those other major organs I spoke about, this is when stuff gets really, really serious. Imagine some people can store 3 liters of fat, while others then have the ability to store 10 liters of fat. That's a huge difference. That's a big old difference of 7 liters. Now, besides genetics, how much energy you burn, how many calories you're expending each day through like your movement, your exercise, your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, also known as your NEAT, and then how much you consume through food and drink, they obviously have a massive impact as well. Now, it's 2025, so I'd be very surprised if you haven't heard the term skinny fat before. There's a geezer called Mitchell Lazar. I've got him on my laptop in front of me. And he is the director of the Institute for Diabetes, Obesity, and Metabolism at the University of Pennsylvania's Perelman School of Medicine. I hope I have not butchered that with my Irish. accent. And he actually suggests that these people that we're calling skinny fat, they are actually most at risk for metabolic disease. You could be skinny, yet end up with a fat disease like diabetes. Now, this goes back to the fact that you only need a small amount of visceral fat to cause some serious problems to your health. Now, besides too many calories, you've got things like your hormones. So testosterone, estrogen, and cortisol are all involved in the production and distribution of fat. And cortisol is a particularly formidable bugger. It's a hormone that we need, and it's a hormone that does some really good stuff, especially in the morning. Cortisol helps wake you up, but it is not a very nice hormone to have too much of it flooding around your system. Cortisol actually lowers your subcutaneous fat, but unfortunately, it's not all good news, and that is because it replaces it with visceral fat. This is why people like me harp on all the time about sleep and why sleep is so important. And that's because when we don't sleep well enough and we don't manage our stress, our cortisol levels are up and up at places we don't want them. So that's why effective stress management is important. And it's why getting your 7 to 8 hours of good quality sleep is equally as important when it comes to not just overall health, but the ability to burn body fat and keep a lean physique. But without doubt, when it comes to fat, the most potent hormone is insulin. Most people will only know insulin as something diabetics take, so they jab themselves, not in the arm, they're not heroin addicts, jab themselves in the stomach, and they do that to control their blood sugar level. But insulin is actually mostly about fat storage. If we swing back to the part I mentioned a few minutes ago of excess fat spilling out, when this happens, there's the real danger that some of that fat finds its way into your muscle and it gets in there, it gets stuck in between your muscle fibers. Think of it like Wagyu. Okay, Wagyu steak. No, it's super marbled. While that steak may be delicious, marbling is an absolute shitstorm for your body and is likely the start of the dreaded insulin resistance. I'm not going to explain the ins and outs and the intricacies of insulin resistance, as that's a whole different video in itself. This is just about visceral fat, but just know it's bad and it can be the beginning of some serious health issues developing. I've spoke about what visceral fat is. I've spoken about what causes it and also the dangers behind it. But how can you actually test your visceral fat levels? So how do you get an idea as to how much you have? Now, the best option you have is a DEXA scan. It's an expense, but it is an expense that is definitely worth every single penny. Now, you might be sitting there, and I wouldn't blame you one single bit, thinking, feck me, Mark. This is just shit news. Okay, visceral fat seems like a right bore, and I'm slightly scared of it. And to that, I would say, good. I've done my job with this video because I want to scare people into action, but it's not all doom and gloom. And the good news is that visceral fat does respond very well to some changes in lifestyle. To improve your visceral fat, you are going to do the following. No surprise, my number one tip for everything health and fitness related, and that is strength training. Strength training builds lean muscle. It also improves your insulin sensitivity and it boosts your metabolic rate, how many calories you are going to burn. Then we have cardio, and especially zone 2 cardio and then high intense interval training. Burns calories for one, okay? So you're going to burn more calories, which obviously then helps with your energy balance, but it also does something very important. That is, it helps mobilize the stored fat, aka your body gets better at using the fat that you've been stored for energy. So remember I mentioned earlier on that it stores the fat and then it uses it later for things like your hiking and that sort of stuff. It gets much better and more proficient at doing that. It becomes more skilled. Then you have nutrition, of course. You want to do things like prioritize your protein. That's going to help you stay more satiated and full. And it's also going to help you preserve your muscle because you're going to be busting ass in the gym. Now you're loving your strength training sessions. Actually, going back to your strength training, 3 full body strength training sessions per week is my suggestion. Okay. 30 to 45 minutes. Honestly, more than enough. Smash your big compound movements. Get in, get out. Bing, bang, bosh. Done. Back to nutrition. You want to limit things like processed foods, added sugars, refined carbs, and those harmful trans fats. Okay, they may be delicious, but please just limit them a little bit. Sleep, hit a minimum of 7 hours per night. Yes, 7 hours of good quality sleep, as this is going to support hormonal balance, which I mentioned a few minutes ago. It's going to try and keep your cortisol levels lower. It's going to jack up your growth hormone as well, which is better for fat burning and muscle building. It's also going to help you regulate your appetite and help with fat loss. Stress management. High cortisol promotes visceral fat storage, so you need to have things in your stress management toolbox like breath work and mindfulness to keep it on the wraps and under control. You could do something like this, grab a notebook and then just like hit yourself in the head. No, maybe that'd make you less stressed with it or more stress. And just pen and paper and write stuff out. Okay, empty your brain onto a pen and paper. But you'd be surprised how much better and less stressed you feel after that. If it doesn't work, you can just like punch a notebook and maybe that'll work, or stab your husband with the pen. No, don't do that. Not suggesting any violence here on this channel. Let's keep it nice and light and happy. Also, alcohol moderation. Okay, you want to limit excess alcohol intake because that actually contributes to the fat around your stomach and fatty liver. The less of that we have, the better. And then it just wrecks your sleep and your energy expenditure, your ability to keep in a calorie deficit. Yes, it's fun, but it does have to be kind of pushed to the side. Last one is regular movement. You want to increase your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, so the amount of calories you burn doing everything else that isn't planned exercise. Walking, standing, taking the stairs, do what I do all day with my undiagnosed ADHD and just fidget all the time. It does burn calories, believe it or not. And these have a big impact on your overall daily energy expenditure, TDEE. And this just makes it much easier to maintain optimal body fat levels. And if you're keen for another video, which I know you are, then check out this video here. It's on the ins and outs of the perfect workout program. It is a doozy. So enjoy.